Yes, Andrew is a trustee of the Permaculture Association, and with his partner Yolanda, they are co-chairs of an organisation called Tastes of Self-Sufficiency. So he is, as I say, very involved in all sorts of environmental wildlife issues around the county. So Andrew, I'll hand over to you, and thank you very much.
Okay, I think I have to figure out how this is going to work. Hang on. Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody. I'm really excited about this talk. It's the first time I've ever done it, so hopefully it comes across in good form. I'm used to public speaking on various matters, but as I say, this is the first time I've done it. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I hope you get excited by it. So as excited as I am about permaculture. So let me get started. When I think Rachel first put out some notification about that, she talked about biodiversity. So I want to start with that. It's not exactly what permaculture is about, but for me, it's the most important word in the English language, and the reason for that I will explain. So if I start with the human gut, then one of the keys to human health lies in the human gut. So specifically, if we have the right organisms, we can be healthy, and the gut biome sends messages to the brain about what it wants to feed on. So if the dominant bacteria are bad ones, then it sends for more bad ones. If we change our diet to a healthy diet, and after a while, the gut biome will adapt to good bacteria, and the biome will demand healthy food. So that's an important thing in our lives to be aware of. Also, a high degree of diversity in the biome will enable the gut biome to be stable. So when there are so-called bad bacteria present, they will not dominate the gut, but will be in balance and therefore not a threat. And the same applies to soil. So in industrial farming, the soil is repeatedly depleted and poisoned, and in time it dies. So if we treat the soil as an organism, then we should feed it with the foods that the creatures in the soil need to be healthy and in balance. So a reflection of what I was talking about in the gut. So plenty of organic matter and natural fertilizers feeding the soil, which enables a thriving, diverse population of woofers. I don't know whether people are familiar with woofers. It's worldwide opportunities on organic farms where you can volunteer, you get accommodation, 3 squares a day. So I treat these organisms in the soil as my woofers. So again, a diverse population, which also includes so-called pests, is in balance and nothing gets out of hand. So the woofers in this picture are working the soil. They're providing drainage, airways, plant services like nitrogen fixing, and they connect the plants to the nutrients and to each other. It is also the same in plant diversity, which is not what I'm showing you here. This is a field of carrots that for some reason have come out of the soil. I don't know what the explanation of that is, but so if you have a field of monoculture crops, then don't the pests, like carrot root fly in this case, know exactly where to go for a feast. If the crops are randomly placed in a jungle of diverse, lush growth instead, then the pests have to work harder to find them. Plus, the diversity of different plants provides habitats for the pests' predators. And also, when the soil is rich in life, the plants will be strong, and pests and predators like to attack weak victims. Now, I grow cabbages organically, and I look after the soil so the cabbages can be strong. I also feed them with the nettle fertilizer 3 times during their early life, and I never get damage from cabbage white caterpillars. I get loads of cabbage white butterflies alighting on the cabbages, but I don't get damage. So yeah, plenty of cabbage whites, no damage. And you'll see a picture of my cabbage shortly. And also, if you can get a high degree of diversity, then you also have a high degree of stability, which is, I guess, another way of saying that there is balance. So the more diversity, the more stable the system, the less likely anything is to upset it. And then in terms of fauna, animals and insects, birds, etc. Insects and fauna, I don't know. Anyway, in terms of fauna, you can see the whole picture here is a system. It's designed by nature, it's resilient, it's productive, and it's easy to manage. It's also diverse, balanced. It's interdependent, so you can see that with the arrows, the interdependency. It's multi-layered, so it's soil, surface layer, plant layer, and it's regenerative. So it actually does evolve. Okay, that's my little speech about diversity, which wasn't what I came here to talk about, but diversity is a key part of nature, and permaculture is about nature. So this is me. That's my haystack. I make my own hay once a year, and this is how I describe myself. And you'll probably see these characteristics in the presentation as I go through. I'm lazy. I'm a lazy gardener. I don't like doing things that I don't have to. I'm also lucky. I'm in the right place at the right time. I am observant, and I'm curious, and I'm inspired. And I'm inspired by nature, and I learn from being observant and curious. And I always think of myself as everything as being perfect if I can just get that balance. And there's my cabbage. What a whopper, and no damage. So yes, my partner and I, we have an acre of land on Haye Hill in South Herefordshire. We call it Taste of Self-Sufficiency. So you can go and see in more detail what we do there on that website. I became a trustee of the Permaculture Association of Britain at least 2 years ago, and I'm really enjoying that, trying to shape the permaculture world in Britain. As Rachel says, I'm the chair of the Ross branch of the Herefordshire Wildlife Trust. For I don't know how many years I've been doing public speaking for the Woodland Trust on ancient woodlands. In fact, I've got a presentation tomorrow night. And I also volunteer with the Herefordshire Green Network. So perhaps I could ask people in the audience to actually put in the chat what they think permaculture is about, because I'm curious to know, what do you think? So also you can see, so I'm going to go through two things basically. What is permaculture? And how does it help solve our problems? So in 2013, I moved to this 1 acre field on Haye Hill, and that's the top picture, how it looked then. And the bottom picture is how it looks. Yeah, this is last year, and this summer it'll look like that again. It has transformed quite dramatically, and one of the main things has been permaculture in this sense. So you can see the difference between the two. It's 1 acre. We have about 350 square meters of annual vegetable production. We have a newly created perennial vegetable patch, which is where the direction of travel that we're going. We have a flower meadow all around these vegetable patches and all around the ground. And last time we measured or counted, we had over 70 species of wildflower. And it's been growing. The more I mow it, the more species arrive. Pretty much every year we get something that's new, we haven't seen before. There's a woodland on the land. There's an orchard. And this winter I planted the canopy level layer trees for a forest garden. And I'll talk a bit about forest gardens later. We have 2 lime kilns. In fact, we think we have 4 lime kilns, but 2 are buried underground. We've got 2 open to the elements. So, and the way we see our land is not as the top picture, but at the bottom picture is everything on our land has a place and contributes to the whole. So there's not a square centimeter of things that shouldn't be there. It's all designed and operated as a natural system. And I'll talk about permaculture and why it's important now. So do we have what's in the chat? Okay, no dig, little interference, growing perennials that keep cropping. So that cycle of putting everything to use so that no waste is created. Yep, I like those. Okay, permaculture, what is it? We're driving the slides, there we go. It's it really is a revolution. And in the sense of a wholesale change of thinking about nature and gardening in this case. And it's also naturally cyclical, which a revolution should be. It revolves through years, seasons, months, and days and nights. But it's also not just about gardening. Permaculture can and is being increasingly used, applied to any of our current woes, whether ecological, social, business, or even governments. It has a place in all those realms in terms of the way that the thinking approach that permaculture offers. So here are the elements of it. So first of all, it's a system. So we talked about nature being a system earlier on. And here's a definition of a system: set of things working together, part of a mechanism, interconnecting network, a complex whole, which I think we can pretty much agree is what nature is. It's a complex whole. And so we can't reduce nature as we do like to do as humans in order to take what we want without regard for consequences. Nature will also work to bring balance, and the more we try to exploit it, the bigger the consequences. So climate change is one such consequence that we're seeing very much in the news these days. And biodiversity loss is another, which we don't see so much in the news as climate change, sadly, but just as important. But when it's allowed to thrive, when nature is allowed to thrive, or if we give it a helping hand, it's a very powerful ally. So that's at the heart of the systems thinking. It's also a design process. There are many principles. You can look them up on the web. There's different people who have different principles that they've defined, and some people define them, the same ones, slightly differently. But I'm going to go through some of those today. I haven't got time to go through them all, just to give you a flavour for some of the things that this design process is set around. It's also a set of ethics, and the definition of ethics is that they are culturally evolved mechanisms that regulate self-interest, giving us a better understanding of good and bad outcomes. And these ethics for permaculture have really come from research into community ethics, particularly learning from cultures that have existed in relative balance within their environment for much longer than more recent civilizations. So ancient cultures, ancient way of being, and the wisdom that they contain are very much in these ethics. And I'll explain a bit more about the ethics shortly as well. So here's the best definition that I've seen so far. There are many, many definitions, and you can look up, I don't know, infinite number of definitions. But for me, it's a design approach, and it's based on what we can observe in a flourishing natural ecosystem. So we're basically using nature as our teacher. It's also a set of design principles which are derived from whole system thinking. So it's not just design approach, it's systems thinking. And those two things link very much together. But it can be applied at different levels. So you can use it in your back garden at a scale in regenerative agriculture. It can be used in town planning or rewilding or community resilience. So it's applicable at any level. So there are quite a few debates about what permaculture is, and I have lots of debates with my fellow trustees, and so it's quite difficult to pin it down because it's a system, and so it's a complex system. So it's very easy to see it from very many different perspectives. And I don't think we should get hung up about what is in and what it isn't in permaculture. But we should see that it's whatever serves us best. And by us, I mean human and non-human in terms of our needs. So it's a ready-made system to solve our woes, I think. You can learn about it, pick it up, and apply it in many different circumstances without having to think how you're going to approach a regeneration project, for instance. Plus, there is an organisation which is ready to help with education, training, qualifications, networking, consultancy, and support. And that's the Permaculture Association of Britain. And they can provide training at an introduction level or basic design level, or even at diploma level, where you're getting up to serious levels of knowledge. And there is a network of tutors to support that education and training. They're based in Leeds, and they've just last year celebrated their 40th anniversary. So it's not a new organisation, it's been around a long time. It's definitely led by membership. And there is their website, if you want to go and see what's in their website. It's quite an old, sometimes a little clunky website, and within the next 3 or 4 months, a new version is going to be launched, and it'll be much more user-friendly. So if you go and have a look at it now, come back in 3 or 4 months and just see how good it is then. So, as I've said before, they offer education and qualifications. They also run events at a British level and also European level. They work in collaboration with some European permacultural associations and do a European convergence event once a year. There are a lot of networks in the Permaculture Association. They also help and support member-led projects. So if members want to do something but can't get the grant without the support of a charity, then they can offer their charitable status to help that member-led project. They do grant-funded projects, and they also offer support. So let's go back to the systems thinking a bit for a moment. Excuse me. So we saw earlier that nature is a system, and I think we were talking about it being diverse, complex, independent, cyclical, etc. Using, if we see it as a system, then using systems thinking in our work makes sense too. And after all, we are out to learn from and support nature. So you could probably sit and look at that that diagram for quite a long time and really see a lot of system in there. And that's that's how we can do it, by looking at what's around us, what's in nature, and have nature teach us. The ethics, there are three ethics. One is earth care, one is people care, and the last one is fair share. So they're the bedrock of permaculture thinking. And without these, we would lack a moral compass to guide our work towards beneficial outcomes. So earth care is about provision for all life systems to continue and multiply. It's looking after that organism, which is Gaia, Earth, whatever we want to call it. But recognizing in people care that we also need to meet our needs. So there needs to be a provision for people to access the resources that they need. And the third one is the balance, which says, okay, do those two things, but you need to live within limits. So distributing life-giving resources fairly amongst not just people, but also animals and plants alike. And also not forgetting that there are generations coming after us, and we shouldn't steal it all to the detriment of our children and grandchildren. So here are some of the design principles that permaculturists use, and I'm going to go through each of these. But there are, as I said before, there are plenty more for you to find as well later. So we start with observation. I'm sure, being nature type people, we've all stood or sat still and waited for nature to reveal itself. And you can see these guys they look as though they've been standing there forever. So if you stand and stare at one place for very long, you'll see the complexity and beauty of that place. If you stand there for a day and a night, you will experience the changes in light, weather, animal, bird, and insect activity and plant activity. If you stand there for a month, you'll see the changes in the growth and or decay of the natural system. If you stand there for a year, you'll see the seasons come and go. But don't forget to take something to eat and drink. The point is that you'll see what weather patterns are, how much rain falls, and where it collects, the wind and where it blows unabated, and which areas are protected, where the sun reaches, and areas that are constantly in shade, or where there are frost pockets. So the more you observe the land that you want to work with, the more familiar you are with what you're dealing with. And that's where it starts to be possible to think about design. So you get to know the nature of the land. You can start to design, for instance, for water collection, for where the trees should be, the vegetables. So this is where one of my characteristics I mentioned earlier was curious. So this is being curious. Many times permaculture design starts with water because it's the fundament to all growth. So what are the contours of the land? Where does the water flow? Is it serving our growing plans? Where might we collect it? How can we better capture it or slow it down? And here we see a set of swales. They're basically channels which are dug out the bank. The soil is put into a bank, and it's designed to capture and slow water. So slowing and spreading and capturing water enables the land to thrive. So if you think about a valley, a steep valley, the water would run down in a gush down the center and sweep lots of stuff with it, and the land either side would not benefit from that water. So this is what one of the functions of the swale. Plants and plant roots have sufficient water to grow well if you plant them in those banks. And it creates the start of the natural cycle of life and decay to build a soil that dry lands could not sustain. Here you can see them running along the contour line of the land, and they can be planted up with plants that we want to grow. You can do it on a landscape level as well. This is crossing very many contours, and you can see that there's a rich diversity of plants that are planted in there. These are probably we would describe these as what's called key lines. So they follow the contours, and they're designed to capture the flow of water and distribute the water across the whole landscape, rather than allow it to flow on the shortest route downhill. And you can see that there are belts of trees and other plants that are planted on the lines to benefit from the water. The whole system slows the water whilst retaining as much as possible in the soil. Excuse me. That can be applied also in a way that there are reservoirs created. So the water can be collected into the reservoir and distributed via the key lines to where we want it, and we can create a much more rich landscape in terms of being able to cope with drought and to build the soil up. So here's another way of doing it. It's called Permaculture. So this is a hugel bed. The top left-hand corner is the starting point, fairly large pieces of wood, and then progressively finer wood goes on top, and then finer and finer organic matter, it might be compost, and then finally a layer of soil. So the huge pile of organic matter there will absorb and retain large quantities of water for the benefit of the plants growing in the top of the soil. It takes years to rot right down, but when it's spent, it will have produced a great deal of compost as well. So it's a natural cyclical process that gives benefits to production all the way through. The next principle is relative location. So that's not where do we find granny, but where are all the design elements relative to each other. So in this diagram, you can see bottom right-hand corner, red-roofed house. So that's where I'm living. And it's like ergonomics meeting nature, but it's a natural system we're designing here. So it involves what's called zoning, and zone 0 is where we're living, our house. That's the most important thing for us because that's where we spend a lot of our time. In zone 1, it's the land around the house, and we should consider placing things like herbs, commonly used vegetables, which we go to every day, immediately surrounding our house, so we don't have to go so far to tend them or to collect them. It all makes really a lot of sense anyway. Zone 2 is perhaps the main vegetable beds, an orchard, and any animals which we have, which we visit maybe a few times a week, and so on, until you get into the natural environment that we hardly ever go to, but occasionally in zone 5. Or to put it another way, this is the wordy version. House areas needing continual observation and frequent visits, through to natural unmanaged areas. So this is us starting to think about design and how we want the land to be from the point of view of our needs and relative location. And again, I put the star on because I'm lazy and I don't want to go to a long way to get to my vegetables. The next one is principle is produce no waste. I think somebody put that in the chat. But permaculture sees it as from a different perspective, and that is that there is no waste. That every waste is really a resource. You just have to see what the resource can be. And here's a good example. So I used to have, because I cut a lot of brash around the site. So pruning brash or brambles or things like that. And I used to see it as a problem. So I would have a bonfire and I'd burn it. That's not very environmentally good, but it got rid of the stuff really quickly and easily. But then I discovered charcoal making, and it proved to be quite fun. I'm really into it, and it's very simple. So when you burn woody materials without oxygen, then the gases burn first, and then the solids, the lignum or whatever, burns after, and you end up with ash, which itself is a resource. But when you stop the burning between the two stages, you end up with charcoal. And I stop it by dousing it with water. And it's great for conditioning the soil. It holds water, and it's if you grind it into almost a powder, it's a great habitat for microorganisms. So I break it down to almost powder, I add liquid fertilizer, and I go into the woods and collect indigenous microorganisms and add the whole thing to my compost. So it's the woofer meals and accommodation is this charcoal. So there are other ideas, produce no waste. So you could repurpose a tire to make it into a planter. You can feed the scraps of food to the animals, or you can go for a compost toilet and find that your own human waste is a valuable resource as well. Next principle is everything gardens. Again, this is woofers and it's me being lazy. So you can see here's some of my team. Microorganisms, insects, mammals, birds, and even weeds. So we like to generally dig weeds out, but they actually provide good water drainage points and air into the soil, and all they need is the tops cutting off and the roots can carry on providing that benefit. Another principle is each element in your system should have multiple functions. And again, it's a lazy thing. So if I take the example of the hugel bed, that we saw earlier. Here's a picture of what I assume is a hugel bed. There's organic material in under a hump, and things are growing on top. So it's storing moisture. It's preventing erosion, and it's also supporting growth. So the more functions you can have from each element, the less work you have to do, and the better the system. And the other way around, each function should have as many elements as possible. So in this case, the function would be water retention. So on the left-hand diagram, you can see we're storing water, but we're also flowing water to where we want, because the swale there is acting as a diversion for water. And then you can apply it to those key lines that we looked at earlier. You can use that function of water retention using forestry or orchards, or those key lines to divert and channel the water to large areas where you can use it. And again, the more elements you can have in that function, the richer the system. The next principle is the problem equals the solution. So very often we see things that are a problem, like I did with the brash, but actually I found a solution for that. And here's a pretty, I don't know, environmentally challenging one perhaps, but if I want to build a house, then used tires are a really good way of building an insulating wall. And then you don't have the tires anymore. I don't like tires particularly, because once they're produced, they're in the environment forever. But here's a solution to that problem, that I can, if I want to build a building, I can use tires, and that saves me some money and gets rid of the tires. Weeds, they are they're a solution as well. I mean, we don't cut our nettles anymore because they, you know, the ladybirds love them. We eat them. We make fertilizer from them. So the problem becomes a solution. They're a resource. So I let them grow, and I enjoy them. So yeah. And in the other picture on the right, the waste of food, and that's that straw which is going to rot is providing rich food for the chickens. So always see whatever problem you think you have, then find the solution that problem is. In permaculture terms, they say the problem is the solution, or the solution is the problem. It takes a bit of thinking through, but these are examples of how to apply it. This one is least effort and greatest effect. So we've seen this diagram a couple of times before, but I'll draw your attention to the do not disturb sign. So the least effort you can do is not do anything. And in some circumstances, it can have the greatest effect, because nature will organize itself to increase its diversity and its productivity. It doesn't always serve our needs. So, but sometimes it does. For instance, if you, somebody put in the chat that permaculture is about no dig. So if you dig your soil, you break up all that web of fungi which is feeding the trees and the plants. You disturb the bacteria, the nematodes, the mites, protozoa, earthworms. They're all disturbed, and they all have to go about resetting the soil to be productive. Whereas if you leave it alone and feed it, then it'll have the greatest effect. And another example, which I'm sure most people will be familiar with, is if you want to regenerate a woodland or a forest, then one of the most effective ways of doing it is to stop browsing animals. So you can plant a lot of trees, which is a lot of effort, or you can stop the browsing animals getting in, or cull them, or reintroduce predators, and then nature will regenerate the forest by itself. So that's a great effect of the least effort. This principle is about cooperating, don't compete. We're taught at school always to compete, but actually permaculture is about cooperation. So here's two examples. The one on the left is about a guild of plants. That's what it's called. So you have a fruit tree sticking through, and then there's some fruit bushes and shrubs. There's some mulch, maybe that's comfrey, I don't know, nitrogen fixing plants, pollinators, etc. They're all acting together to support each other. So there's cooperation, and that's what we want to design into our garden. And the other one on the right-hand side is, if anybody's heard of the Three Sisters, it's about corn, beans, and squash. And so the beans provide nitrogen in the soil, and the corn provides a living support. The squash acts as a mulch, which keeps moisture in and weeds down. And it's a great idea. So this is about designing to cooperate. The next one, I've had a lot of difficulty with getting my head around, but what's the most diverse place in a system, a natural system, is the edge. And if you look at it on the very largest of scales, then it would be the Earth, the actual covering of Earth between the mineral layer of the planet and the gaseous layer. So it's the interface between the soil and the air, and it's where we live, and it's where there is the most natural diversity and productivity. So that's the edge effect, and you need to pay attention to edge effects in permaculture, because that is where you get such productivity. And on a smaller scale, it would be if you're coming from a woodland to an open field, or from a pond to the bank of the pond. There's a lot of interconnection between the different habitats and feeding areas, which is producing these productive exchanges and crossovers from one place, one system to another. So edge effects are very important. You can design those into your design to take advantage of them. So now I'm going to talk about some things that some people say aren't permaculture, but I like to think of them as a manifestation of the principles, or the systems, natural systems thinking. So it's no dig. It didn't come from permaculture. Well, have you ever seen nature dig? So what nature does on the left-hand side is, in a woodland, for instance, it will create natural clearings where there's light, but it'll also put down a mulch of materials every year to regenerate the soil. And in the soil, there's all that rich life, which is designed and built to be productive. And gardeners, traditionally, we've been taught to tear it up, because we don't want other things competing, plants, for instance, or we want it to look neat. But nature doesn't dig. So if we're looking at a natural system, then we shouldn't dig either. And we get much better productivity through doing that. So typically on the right-hand side, you can see a bed which has got a lot of organic matter put down, and maybe some cardboard, or what that is around the outside, but it's something to suppress weeds, a lot of leaf litter. Yeah. Yeah, so the question is, why do gardeners dig their soil and destroy the network of hi-fi and communities of woofers? And I like this, it's not a principle, I like this topic a lot because, as I say, I'm lazy. And when I stopped digging, which was 10 years ago, it was so much easier. People ask us when they come to see our field and see what we're doing and how we do it. They often ask, how long do you spend in the garden? And I say, well, on average, an average day would be no more than an hour. And it's always a shock. And one of the biggest productivities for me was not having to dig anymore. It saved me a lot of time, and not having to mow, although I mow once a year with a scythe. That's hard work, but the rest of the year I have off. So no dig can be applied to virgin ground as well as established ground. And you can see here a typical set of layers that you could put down to bring virgin land or established lands to much better organic content and much more productive. And I was reminded that the Irish farmers used to just put down loads of organic matter on grasslands. I was told this by an Irish farmer, and they grow plants directly into them. So big piles of organic matter. They planted to them straight away, and they achieved a yield in the first year, not necessarily a big yield, but it developed a rich soil once the materials are decomposed, and the following years that they were up and running. But it is important to put this organic matter on because when, I don't know, perhaps you noticed that when you first dig a grass lawn or a grass area, that the first year is just usually very productive, and then it drops off. And that's because grass, leaving it fallow, allows the land to heal. But if once you've put it into production, you don't continue to feed it and to heal it, then it does diminish. And this is the challenge that monoculture farmers have, is they're having to always put more and more materials or non-organic materials on to try and keep to the same yield. And then, of course, there's the raised beds, which are no dig, which are a brilliant idea. And they're becoming more common, and they're an effective way to maintain the soil health whilst growing large amounts of vegetables. So, yeah. The next idea, which is not permaculture, but kind of is. It's not come from the permaculture world, but it is a very interesting system. So you have a natural forest on the left, and then a forest garden on the right, and they look very similar. In fact, you can hardly, the line down the middle looks a bit like blurred. Is it real? It seems like a new trend, but in fact, it's been around as long as humans. So this is how we used to live in a forest. And Yolandi and I, we visited an eco homestead in the Philippines a few years ago and found a thriving forest garden there, which looked like a woodland area, but it had a really quirky owner who was our teacher, and he had trees. He introduced us to the eye wash tree, and he uses the leaves to produce eye wash, which cleans the eyes out, can help with infections, or even just brightens the eyes up. And he introduced us to the shampoo tree, and then he introduced us to the snake deterrent grasses and all manner of hidden vegetables and fruits. And it was he learned how to do this from his grandparents. And it just occurred to me then that this is as old as the hills, but it's a very it's newly discovered way of gardening. So the idea is that we create a habitat for diverse realms of useful plants, from a canopy layer, so the very highest, tallest trees, down to ground cover plants and perennial vegetables. And it doesn't require much effort to maintain. It takes some effort to start and takes years to establish. But it ends up a bit like the Garden of Eden. And very low maintenance is the idea, and very productive. So I like that one as well, being lazy. So coming towards the end now, how am I doing for time? Not too bad. So sometimes permaculture is likened to biomimicry. I like to liken it to biomimicry. And I came across this picture, which is the 9 basic principles of biomimicry. So it runs on sunlight. Nature uses only the energy it needs. Form fits function, recycling, cooperation, diversity, local expertise, curbs excesses, and taps the power of limits. So permaculture is a system, it's established, it's really useful, really interesting, but there are many different ways to look at it as well. So you don't have to just go to permaculture necessarily, that you can find it in many different ways of thinking about how to regenerate nature. So to summarize, when I practice permaculture, I feel alive and connected because I get a regenerative system, I get sustainability, I have minimal effort, I get plenty of support, and I mean support from nature. I get time in nature, and I get time to be nature. We are not separate, we are nature. I get a huge amount of fun and learning. And I'd like to say that we've been on our lands, this is our 11th year, we've been there 10 years now. And every year I take on a big, what I call a university course. And the first year was just getting to grips with growing stuff organically. Second year was learning about permaculture, and the third year was learning about biodynamics, which I could do a talk on as well. And then I had a year of really learning how to make super compost in 5 minutes, and so on. But I also do a lot of learning of, can I grow, chickpeas? Can I grow licorice roots? What can I get out of the cupboard store to put in the ground, and let's see what that does. So huge amount of fun and learning, and it's not waned. The interest has not waned at all. It's not a chore, it's a joy. And of course we get loads of health-giving food. So my question to you is, would you like to become a permaculture member? It helps the Permaculture Association to help people to get access to information about permaculture, to promote the benefits of permaculture to a wider audience, to support networking activities, to support research, to build evidence base, and also to run the website to promote courses and more. It's £36 per annum. And it enables you to connect with experts in permaculture, to connect with members in your local area, to join dedicated member calls. There are events, there's a blog, there's a magazine, and so on. So that's my question to you. Would you like to join the Permaculture movement? So go to the website and you can find out how to join. And finally, a shout out for No Mow May. I saw that in one of the Herefordshire Green Network's weekly letters. emails. I've done this for 10 years now. I only mow my grass once a year, whether it needs it or not, and that's in August. Definitely no mow May, and that's on the left is our wildflower meadow. They're not all wildflowers, but they are, well, they're not necessarily normally wildflowers, but some of them garden escapes. But that's the quality of our sward, as it were, grasses and flowers. And that's me at the top right, scything. And when we moved here in May 2013, we bought this 1 acre field and we didn't know what to do when the grass started growing. So I quickly looked up on the internet about scything, because we didn't want any mechanical, motorized means of cutting. And I found a course with Simon Fairley in Dorset. He was offering a mini apprenticeship. So I went there, I worked my socks off for a week, learned how to scythe, how to make hay, the whole process, including dodging the rain. And he put me up, fed me, and gave me a scythe at the end. So that was problem solved. So every year I've been cutting with a scythe. It's great fun. And then we make our own hay. That's the Landy in the bottom right-hand corner. We use an old tarpaulin from caravan awning to stack the hay on, and then we can pull it to where we want to go and make a big haystack. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I guess we'll throw it open to questions.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Your enthusiasm for permaculture really comes through, and I am deeply envious of the pictures of the veg beds with so many healthy vegetables growing all so close together. I thought my broad beans were all right, but they're rather put into the shade by your beds. So we've already got one question just come into the chat from Elizabeth, who's asking, how long does it take you to take care of the land? I know you said you were only out in the garden once for an hour a day. She says, could you have a full-time job and successfully run the acre of land? I don't know if she's hoping to do that herself whilst working.
It can be a challenge. When I say I spend an hour in the garden a day, it's on average. So there are times when I'm scything, in August, I'm spending more than 1 hour a day usually. When I'm sowing and planting out, that's usually more than 1 hour a day. But there are times when I'm just swanning around enjoying the garden. So the challenge would be on those busy moments in the year, or on projects that you want to do, to find the balance between working full time and not. But hey, I could do it, I think. But you have to learn. So when we first started, we didn't know what we were doing, so we were wasting time. First of all, by digging, wasting time by turning compost heaps, wasting time not wasting time, but spending time learning how to scythe and make hay, and how to grow plants. And every year we learn more and more. We get lazier and lazier, and more productive. So you have to put in some time for that learning, but it pays you back. So it is possible. You could, if you've got weekends off, you could do a 2-day blitz in the garden and try and make that up for the rest of the week. But yeah, I think, yeah, but also don't necessarily start on a grand scale. We started with a veggie bed, which was I think it was 8 meters by 8 meters. No, it wasn't that big. 6 meters square or something. And we grew pretty much all that we wanted, and that was our start. And then as we learned, we knew we could do more with the same amount of time. So maybe that's a way of doing it. Have the time that you've got, start small, learn from what I've been talking about, principles and techniques and stuff like that. Learn on an annual basis or an ongoing basis how you can improve things, and then you can expand as you've got more time. But that might be a way of doing it.
Just going back to one comment I put in the chat whilst you were talking, you said about nature is a no-dig system, but what about the soil being turned over by large mammals like boar? Does that not count as digging, or is that just because they're just turning over the surface and opening it up for colonizer plants?
Yeah, when I say no dig, and I'm a fan of it, I do dig. This year I've put my potatoes in and I haven't dug them in. They're sitting on the surface of the soil and they're covered in hay. So I'm always experimenting how little I can dig. But I've got parsnips. That doesn't work for parsnips, so they go in the ground, and then I have to dig them out. So and that's a bit like what boar are doing. If they got in my garden, they'd go for my parsnips, and then they would dig them out.
Yes.
And I would get annoyed. But yeah, it's because we also do biodynamics, and they talk about not disturbing the soil levels, but their definition of digging is below, I think it's about 4 inches on the top. So but the thing is, humans, we dig down. I was taught to every year to double dig. That's 2 spade lengths into the ground, and it's hard work, and that's what destroys. So the really rich soil is not necessarily the top, and biodynamics people will say you've got to disturb that to agitate the organisms to make the growing productive. So it's a definition of what a dig is. But if you've got, for instance, raised beds, then you don't have to dig those because you're not disturbing, not standing on the soil. And I don't have raised beds. I have just ground level beds, and I rely on the organisms in the soil and the plants to create my pathways for water and air, etc. And I don't have really soft and crumbly. Well, I have crumbly soil. I don't have really soft soil like you would in a raised bed, but it works. It's because of all the organic material that's going in there, and the organisms are sorting things out. So that's the point: is not to damage those. And occasionally there are disturbances. Wild boar don't wholesale dig up forests. They go for what's interesting, and they're part of the ecosystem. So they're like the worms traveling through the soil, but on a larger scale, I suppose.
Yes, I think double digging was just designed to give people bad backs, wasn't it?
Yes.
Jean is asking a bit more about your field after the hay cutting. How did you convert it? I imagine she's asking how it then became a wildflower meadow. Were you proactive or simply reactive?
Yeah, I was lucky. Now let me explain. So the first year we wanted to cut the grass, and that was always on our mind. But it grew really tall, and there were wildflowers in there, because I think that there will be almost anywhere. Even if it's the odd dandelion, that's a wildflower, isn't it? So, but every year I would cut the hay and take it away because I thought I had a use for it, and I do. But after a year or 2 years or 3 years, I started to notice that the number of species of wildflower was going up. When we first counted them, which is probably in the second year we were there, we had 40 something species that we could count, which we thought was pretty impressive. but we're now in the 70s. And what do? Well, we just cut the hay and take it away. And it's like, oh, this is amazing. Every year there's more and more and more. So we don't, no, we don't work. I have tried, dressing the land with seeds or hay from another field, but it doesn't seem to work as well as just cutting until the flowers arrive, and they do arrive. It's like weeds; they always come. I cleared a bank of brambles fairly early on because I didn't want the brambles there, and then hemp agrimony turned up. Hadn't had it in the garden before, and then the next year rosebay willow herb turned up. And I use rosebay willow herb. It's not a problem. It's a solution. I make tea from it, and it's lovely. So just keep cutting, taking away, impoverish the soil, and see what happens. And I reckon anybody could do that with any patch of lawn.
Does that answer your question, Jean? Is that? Oh, hang on, you're mute. Ooh. Okay. And Jane has asked if you can give any examples of evidence-based research done by the Permaculture Association. As I was listening to your talk, I was thinking back to learning biology at school when we were taught about food chains, and then that evolved into food webs as scientists began to realize the complexity. And the more you read, the more you discover people are finding more and more complex links and processes. So I guess there is always research going on.
I'm just I'm going to cheat because my brain's pretty frazzled. I'm looking it up on the website. Current research projects. Oh, nothing there. Multifunctional woody polyculture systems. I don't know, well, agroforestry. Yeah, that's something, isn't it? Yeah, it's my brain's gone a blank. I'm sorry. I'll see if I can find something.
Okay, but I guess the website is the place to look for that, because any work that is going on would be published on the Permaculture website.
Yes. I think there's another good resource I didn't mention yet, and that is the Permaculture magazine. It's a publication that you can subscribe to as well. I think it's it used to be £15 a year or something, and you get four issues in a year. And that's where we started, actually. We just started subscribing, and we'd look at the magazine, and it would be full of inspiring articles from people who are practicing permaculture. And that's what got the juices going and got us really into permaculture. It's a wonderful, wonderful magazine. It used to be the publication of the Permaculture Association, and then it spun off into a separate entity. And so I would highly recommend having a look at that or subscribing to it. Yeah.
I'm just posting in the chat that the recording will be on the HGN website. Whoops, I can't type. And that I will put in the newsletter when it's been posted on the website, so that because there's been quite a lot to take in your speech, and I know that I was contacted by a few people who said they'd love to attend but couldn't because of the timing, had something else on. So I'm sure people will be going to the HGN website to have a look at the recording. Does anyone else have any other questions? Or sorry, Andrew, you were.
was going to say one other thing I would say is you can. I wrote an article for the Permaculture magazine some time ago because I was miffed that when you try to go on a permaculture design course or any type of permaculture course, they seem so expensive. They're paying, I don't know, £500 or something for a course, and then you have to go and find your accommodation, and because it's not necessarily near where you live. And it really bugged me because the way we got into it was, as saying, buying the Permaculture magazine and being inspired, looking at the articles and going, oh, we could try that. And I do really recommend that. So I wrote the article, which is called Open Source Permaculture. Why does it cost to do it? Why not just get out there? If it's about observation and nature and mimic, we're all capable of seeing how nature works. We all know a bit about how nature works. And just take those ideas that other people have gone with and start and go out and try one. And it really does work. And I've had a lot of positive feedback from people that also have that same view. It's too expensive to get into, but it's not. I encourage anybody to try.
One thing you didn't say: are you completely self-sufficient?
No.
Right.
It's impossible. I defy anybody to be self-sufficient, because self-sufficient is about everything.
Yes.
And here's the lesson of self-sufficiency. We grow all the vegetables and fruits that we need, or sometimes we go foraging, which includes scrumping. But we don't pay for vegetables or fruits in the year at all. And we designed our garden around what we need from a nutrition point of view. So we designed our proteins. We grow quinoa, for instance, as a protein. We grow beans for drying as a protein. And then we looked at carbohydrates, so potatoes, Jerusalem artichokes, parsnips, the main carbohydrates, and then all the other things, the greens, the carrots and stuff like that. We grow like that. But I think the lesson that we've had is people ask us about self-sufficiency, and we do say we are a taste of self-sufficiency. We are not self-sufficiency. We are just the taste. We like to eat rice, and I've tried growing rice, but unsuccessfully. I like a cup of coffee from time to time, and I can't grow coffee. We've just planted some pepper trees and some persimmon trees and all sorts of exotic stuff, because, well, climate change, maybe. But you know, we like to wear clothes and have spectacles, and we can't make those ourselves. So I think it taught us a lot about community, because for me, if you can't be sufficient yourself, do you know somebody who can? And that's where community comes from. If everybody's contributing to the whole to make a community self-sufficient, then there's a common purpose and a common goal and support for each other, because no one person can do anything. And that's what we've lost in our world, I think.
And Jane has asked how you manage without citrus fruit, whether she's thinking from the point of view of vitamin C, but I guess you can get that from other.
We do. We're not perfect. We do. We don't have a car, but we have a couple of motor scooters and a couple of electric bikes. You know, they were manufactured mostly from oil, and they've come a long way. So yeah, we do eat. We buy lemons. We don't tend to buy much in the way of oranges, but we do buy lemons. We buy ginger, because again, I haven't been able to successfully grow that. We'll try anything. But yeah, we grow some normal stuff. We try to not buy things that have to come a long way, but you know, vitamin C is important. You can get it from leafy vegetables as well. So we're not wedded to citrus fruit, but we do enjoy it. So I think as long as 95% of what we're doing is wholesome and local, then the other 5% can be a bit of a treat.
Okay, well, we're coming towards the end of our time. Does anybody else have any other questions for Andrew? My one other question was, where is the Tyre House? Is that in this country?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. There is one in Brighton. There's one down in Brighton if you want to go and see.
It looked a bit like a Hobbit house.
Yeah, they do. I think they do it quite a lot in the States. You know, people who are living in the desert, they use them.
Right, right. Well, as I say, we're oh, and Jean has just asked, can people visit your site?
Physically, I guess the question is, because you can get on the web and see what we're doing. We do, yeah. If you get in touch with us through our email, and then we do have people visit. They come for 3 hours or 3 or 4 hours, and we basically give them a big download of what we do and how we do it in the practical terms, so you can see the soil and touch it and see and smell the fertilizer if you want, because it's pretty foul. And so we can point and shoot at every aspect of what we're doing in the garden and also in the house, because you know, we do so much from scratch. You can learn about preserving and how we preserve things. We don't have a freezer, for instance. We bought a freezer when we arrived because we thought we're producing all these vegetables and fruits to be stored, and then we put them in the freezer, and a year later we'd throw them away because we're eating out of the garden every day. So we got rid of the freezer. Yeah, we dumb down our life a lot, and it works. It's the best life.
I'm just wondering if we ought to have an HGN outing to visit your site. I think there'd be a lot of interest. So yeah.
Yes, if you can drum people up, then yeah, we'll sort out a time to do that. Yeah,
okay.
love to do that.
Okay, we'll put that in the newsletter. So yes, lots and lots of thanks coming into the chat now. It's been really interesting. I've learned an awful lot. So thank you very much indeed. And also thank you for giving a plug to No Mow May, which I think is a tremendous scheme. And I'll be mentioning that in the newsletter. If anyone attending is not a member of Herefordshire Green Network, we'd love you to join us, to subscribe to our newsletter, or to support us financially if you can. The website is hgnetwork.org, and you can click on the bottom right hand corner and just subscribe to the newsletter, or you can actually register as a member of HGN. So I think all that remains is to me to say thank you very much, Andrew, for your time, for a very inspiring talk, and thank you everybody for attending. So thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.